Welcome to Good Humans Podcast. Kal Glanznig. How you going, brother?
Great to be here.
Mate, new roommate. How good's this? Cal's a great friend of mine. We're doing some work together at the moment in the environment and mental health space, and Cal is one of the most inspiring guys I know, so I'm sure everyone listening right now is going to get a lot out of this chat. But the thing that's really cool is we've known each other probably for a couple of years now in the space that we're working in, but I love doing these podcasts because we're going to go back and I'm going to get to learn your story. And I want to really encourage anyone out there, if you've got any friend who you've met in the last chapter of your life, I guess, but you don't know that much about before their life, I encourage you to have a conversation like this, even if it isn't obviously on a podcast like we're doing right now. It's just so special getting to learn people's journeys and understand a bit more about their upbringing and understand why they are the way they are. So that's what we're going to do today with you, Cal, and I'm very excited for it. But the first question I do open with always is, what are you grateful for right now, today in life?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm grateful for the Gold Coast weather. I thought I brought the Sydney weather up with me today, but I'm definitely grateful to be embarking on this next chapter, building Blue Minds, and grateful to be able to live with you and get some great work done.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fun couple of months. We live in a beautiful spot here on the Gold Coast. Carol's gone over to Brazil for a few months for visa purposes, and I needed to find a roommate to help me cover the rent, and you were like, do you know anyone that could maybe help sublet to me for 3 months while we do these workshops? And I was like, well, the world works in mysterious ways.
Sure
and
does.
Literally a few weeks after Carol left, you're here. So today we're going to get to know your story. You're doing some amazing stuff in the environment space. You're running for council in Cronulla at the moment. You're the youth ambassador for the UN for Australia for the environment. I probably got that completely wrong, but we're going to talk about it a bit later. But you've done some amazing stuff, and you're only 25 years old, so there's...
24.
24, not even 25. There you go. So it's going to be really fun to get to know your story. But let's go back to the start. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? What was life like up until high school that I kind of need to know about to understand your story?
Yeah, no, it's great to be here, and I guess it's always cool to have a chat, looking back at the past, because I feel like you know me in a very, recent time frame. So, I grew up in the Sutherland Shire. My life, I guess, in childhood, I had a very active upbringing, very loving childhood, lots of time with family, friends, doing nippers, surfing, bushwalking in the national park. I guess just developing a real love for the community, a real love for our natural environment. And when I was younger, I played water polo, so I started playing when I was 9 years old and still play now. And that sort of led me to, I guess, a bit of a journey, making metro teams and then state teams, sort of leading into high school.
Yeah, wow. And you got siblings, yeah?
Yeah, so I got one little brother, Tristan.
Nice. Yeah, I love Cronulla. I spend not that much time in Cronulla, but I definitely did a bunch of surf comps over there, and obviously living on the other side of the bridge, I know all about Cronulla and I have some great friends there. What was your high school experience like? When you got to high school, were you like, you know what, I'm going to focus on my academic? Did you think water polo was maybe a career choice after school? Did you go to a private school, public school? What was your education like?
Yeah, well, I went to a public primary school, and then high school, it was sort of between a few different schools, and I applied for the local selective high school, Caringbah High, which was a public high school that you sort of had to do a test to get in. And the last week of year 6, I got in. I was 38th on the reserve list for it, and only just got in the last week, which, going there definitely, set me on a completely different trajectory because it was such an amazing environment at that school. So, I got into Caringbah High, and it wasn't necessarily a very sporty school per se, but it's definitely a school where you could do whatever you wanted to do and be yourself. And I was lucky that I had a lot of mates outside of school with water polo, and, I was involved in different sort of extracurricular activities as well, that when I was at school, I could literally just do whatever I wanted, whatever interested me at the time. So I was in the school band, the choir, every sporting team. I'm not a great singer now, so don't, thank goodness this is a podcast. But I was in, pretty much everything I wanted to do. It was a real positive environment. There wasn't too much bullying compared to a lot of normal high schools. So you could literally just do whatever you wanted to do. And that, I guess, molded me into someone who, tried to follow my values, followed something that I was interested in. And at the same time, my water polo, you sort of set these goals and you start training at, a higher and higher level. And at high school, so I would have been year 9 that I started the New South Wales Institute of Sport, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's sort of a high performance training centre out at Homebush where 4 a.m. every morning. We're having to drive out there, which again is like goes back to, you know, my mum and, you know, the support that my parents have given both me and my brother. But we'd drive out there. I'd do training from be in the water at 5 a.m. We'd have to get in the water from 5 to 7, 7:30, then drive back to the Shire, go to school. I was late. I remember year 11 and year 12, I was late like 80% of the days because I'd get home, quickly have a shower or have, you know, quickly something to eat and then go to school and always get there at like 5 or 10 minutes after school started. And then, yeah, sometimes I'd, you know, nap in the library because I was so exhausted. But yeah, I guess that was sort of my early high school experience, was just, I guess, finding my feet, finding things that I was interested in and making some really cool friends. And I'm still very grateful to be really close with a lot of my high school friends. And then, yeah, starting to push water polo, which towards the back end of high school, started making Australian teams. And then year 12, I made the Australian youth team and we had a 6-week tour to Europe during trials, which was such a hectic experience because a lot
Why
of...
do they do that? Surely they know that age group are in school.
Yeah, it was all across the world. So, I mean...
But like
at
the
that
Aussie, it's like the international events.
Yeah, so you're versing, you know, Spain, Croatia, Serbia. And for a lot of these countries, water polo is their pathway to, you know, move to countries like Australia and have great careers and universities and things like that, where it was very tough, that, you know, balance. And I guess through that experience, I really like buckled down, I guess, with time management, which sounds so cliche, but when I was training like every morning and then in the afternoons doing 2 sessions, you know, maximum, like a gym or pool, or like 2 pool sessions, you sort of don't have any time to study. So you're having to study during the day or like really just make the most of your time. But I was, again, so grateful with Caringbah High because they said to me, you know, when I was, you know, trying to give water polo a real crack at the back end of high school, look, go for it. And, you know, we're going to be here to support you. And it doesn't matter if you're away for 6 weeks in year 12 and miss trials, like you pursue this thing that you're passionate about and, you know, it's important to you, so go for it.
And you get extra points in your ATAR if you represent the country, don't you?
At some unis you do, but Sydney University, which is where I went to uni, you didn't get any of that. So I was, I got back from, which sort of jumps a few of the stories in high school, but I got back from, you know, the World Championships and had maybe 2 weeks before the HSC started. And I missed so much school in year 12 because of camps and training and different things. So I just absolutely got off the plane and just like buckled down and somehow like scraped through and got into the course that I wanted to. So,
and I just love relating to this because when I was in year 11 and 12 and year 10 as well, I was surfing and traveling so much. But because I was representing the school at like an Australia, like an international level, for one, you got like the bonus points. I didn't get an ATAR, so it didn't matter. But the other thing that was really cool was, although I missed the most school, on our school report, I think I had like one of the least absentee attendance out of anyone. Because if I was not there for the day, but I was surfing, it didn't count as missing school. It counted as representing the school. So I probably missed 6 weeks worth of year 12, but I only had like 3 days that they counted as absent.
Yeah, that was similar to me. It was like explained days off and then unexplained days off. So I was like away and late pretty much like well over like 150 days because, it's pretty cool. And I feel like pushing something during high school just like sets you up for that next chapter of life, and you just have so many lessons that you sort of learn throughout the journey as well.
For sure. There's something else that you did in high school that was really cool, and this conversation is obviously going to skew really towards the environment later in the chat, but it started when you were in high school. So where did your first love, I guess, obviously through water polo and living in the Shire, the ocean's a big part of your life, but when did sort of environmental issues start becoming apparent to you?
Yeah, well, I guess going back to my childhood, so my dad worked when I was younger at the WWF, which is the World Wildlife Fund. And I remember when I was young, so he worked in Canberra and is just about to retire this year, but pretty much from when I was 7 to now, he worked during the weeks in Canberra and would come back for weekends. So it was always something that was like discussed on the weekends, like what he was doing, the projects he was working on. And I remember vividly he went down to Macquarie Island because he led a campaign to get rid of feral rabbits there, which is pretty full circle because then meeting, you know, Tanya Plibersek when she was announcing the Macquarie Island Marine Protected Area, I was like, oh, here's a photo of my dad, you know, 10 years before, you know, in this place. But I guess my childhood, you know, having the love for the environment, but also just knowing like some of the problems through just knowing what my dad was doing for work, I guess led me as, high school sort of went on and I learnt about, things in science and geography like climate change and, different coastal processes and things like that. I wasn't necessarily that interested in science when I was, I had my year 7 and year 8 science teacher, like wasn't the nicest to me. So I sort of like dad did a Bachelor of Science. Yeah, I checked out big time. So, but when I sort of, last year, year 10 doing science, I remember the teacher put on An Inconvenient Truth, which is a documentary that pretty much details like some of the things that could happen with climate change. And that really alarmed me and really like woke me up to, okay, well, there's this problem that could impact, the way of life that we love in Australia, what the future that I'm going to create for my kids, that I want to be able to live in a life that we can enjoy now. And I thought, okay, well, what can I do about it? Because it is something that seems so big and seems so out of our control, but sort of distilling it down. And I was 16 at the time. I thought, okay, well, what can I do? And solar panels at schools seems like such a common sense thing, but back then there were barely any schools that had it. And I said, okay, well, how can you go about this process? Wrote a report and sort of said, oh, hey, here are the details of why getting solar in schools would be such a great thing to do. Sent it to the deputy and, pitched it to the school captains at the time and didn't hear anything back. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then I ran for SRC in year 11 because I thought, okay, well, maybe if I like get onto the SRC, I'll be able to like get solar panels installed, have like a bit of a position of power. So I stood up there in front of all my year and I was known as this like athlete and like, I had a very different identity to, I guess, probably the one that I have now a little bit.
Environment change, making like water polo,
I was the
Aussie
jock,
like for Australia.
Yeah. So I was, stood up there and I said, look, guys, like, I'd love to be in the SRC because I'd love to get solar panels installed and it would have so many benefits because my brother who plays water polo and he was just travelling reserve for the Olympics team, so he is unfortunately way better than me at the moment. But he was fortunate to get a water polo scholarship to a private school in Sydney. So I was able to see the disparity, I guess, with my public education and sort of his private education in terms of the resources that my school had. And I thought, well, if you can get solar panels, you can get some savings and actually reinvest that into education equipment. So anyway, so I pitched for SRC and I didn't get in. So they just loved sort of the funny sort of joke pitches, I guess.
Yeah.
So then
high school speeches are always a bit funny.
Yeah. So I learnt that lesson pretty early. So then when I ran for captain in year 12, I thought, okay, this is something that everyone's always said, like, Cal, you be a great school captain, because I was across so many different facets of the school. And so I thought, all right, well, the year knows me. They're either going to vote for me or they're not. Like, the last sort of 5 years has sort of created whatever it's going to be. And I thought, well, what can I do to like do something fun for the year? So I messaged Scott Tweedy on Instagram from Prank Patrol and just sent him a message, said, hey, would you be keen to do a prank for school? And he randomly got back. And so we teed up to do this prank for my school captain speech, which just went horribly wrong because it ended up seeing me being disqualified from being school captain, which, it is what it is.
Would have hurt a lot at the time, probably.
Yeah, but again, like, you think things are so important at the moment, but you sort of like, now I was devastated.
Back and you got a great story now.
Yeah, and but it was so much fun. It was something that the year was still we joke about, but I guess that I didn't get into being school captain, but I easily got into the SRC, and so then when I got into the SRC, I hit up all the different powers that be
at the school.
Contacted the principal and said, look, I'd love to get solar. And he said, oh no, like, let's focus on, trying to turn the lights off more to save energy that way. And I thought, oh, this is crazy. So I just emailed the Department of Education and just said, hey, I'm on the SRC and our school's interested to, get solar. What's the process? And they came back and emailed the principal and said, oh, hey, this kid's been like emailing us over the summer holidays. And so first day back of term 1, he pulls me into his office, and I had been there before. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And he, just said, look, Cal, like, I know you've been emailing the Department of Education. And I was like, oh, goodness. This is not going too well.
Behind his back after he said no.
But then he said, look, like, the process has changed so much. It's way cheaper than it was even a couple of years ago. And all you need to do is raise some money, and then the state government will actually match it with 50%. So then he said, Cal, go and raise the money and then see where it goes. And so I went to our P&C committee, raised $50,000,
Wow,
and then the
through the
state
school.
government matched it, with 50,000. We got a $100,000 solar panel system, which just, it's inspired 20 other schools, and I created a bit of a framework and contact details and sort of put a bit of a plan together and helped 20 schools get solar. And that was I guess as high school sort of rolled on, and it's cool, driving past the school, every week or so and just seeing the solar panels there, which was something that I know is now making the school better.
That's so cool. And I think anyone listening can be inspired by your story for like not giving up, even though you get no as an answer from your teacher or from your principal, not going behind his back, but trying to make it an easier yes for him, I think is the best way to do it. Going like, no, look, it's actually cheaper. Like, here, I can help do the fundraising. It's like, okay, yeah, we can do it. And then it inspires 20 other schools to do it. Is like so cool to show that as a high school student, a 16-year-old, you can make an actual impact and, bring solar panels into your school. And then you can also be aware of like, oh, you know what? I can make change. Let's, you also started Plastic Free Cronulla. When was that?
That was, so I finished high school, got in to do commerce at Sydney Uni, and then
let's come back to then. So you finished high school, you wanted to go to commerce at Sydney Uni.
Yeah.
You're still travelling, competing water polo, like Australian junior team.
Yeah, so I was at NSWIS sort of training for the National League and playing National League, which is sort of the NRL equivalent of water polo. And we had a training session that sort of summer season down at Gunnamatta Bay. It was just after it rained, which Gunnamatta Bay is the bay that our sort of Cronulla Sharks water polo team train in when we want a bit of an outdoor session, get out of the chlorine, which is not the best for your skin. And so we trained down there, and there was so much plastic in the water. So the coach, we got in, I didn't really want to get in. It was miserable. And as we're passing and swimming, there's like bags and wrappers and just rubbish getting all over us. It was the grossest thing ever. And the coach just said, all right, guys, just get out, training's off. And I sort of, got back in my car and I just thought, this is crazy. Like, why can't we enjoy, our local bays? And after high school, I went to schoolies up in Noosa, which is, a very, fun time. But at all these cafes that we were going to, there were no plastic straws, no plastic cutlery. And I remember seeing these certificates that said Plastic Free Noosa. And I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. And so I thought, okay, well, can I create something similar in Cronulla, Plastic Free Cronulla, work with the business community, try to inspire them to get rid of plastic. So I pitched it to the Cronulla Chamber of Commerce, the local business group, and they were very supportive, and we created Plastic Free Cronulla my first semester of uni.
Wow, like, it's so cool, like all these little projects and like getting impactful things over the line. Like, you've got such a good track record for it. That's why I'm so excited. Hopefully you get in to be the council member for your ward in Cronulla, and then maybe work your way up to a politician even though I know you're not super keen. But let's now talk about this next chapter of your life, going through uni and then into working with Defina, because that's kind of, we can catch back up to where I met you. But I'm intrigued to learn why or like when sort of the dream of water polo, I guess, professional. I know you still play, but I like, have you given up on the water polo dream now? Or like,
I mean, just watching the Olympics, it's always like you're watching it and watching your old teammates and or current teammates even like playing. You're like, oh, but I think the biggest thing, like my trajectory and why I sort of did commerce and in high school, like a real turning point as well, was like reading books like Steve Jobs' biography, Elon Musk, even though he's sort of gone a bit off the rails now. But a lot of these stories where you realize that you can create so much change if you just like create something or like have capital to sort of get after things.
So you wanted to get into commerce to do...
start a business. And so my dream, so I was started interning in high school for this company called Defina, which made custom swimwear and sportswear for water polo clubs. And as I sort of grew with the business, I eventually started full-time in marketing and then was promoted to be general manager.
While you're still at uni?
While I was still at uni, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which was, I was full-time work, full-time study, and then training as well, and playing National League. So again, like the learnings that I had at high school and just like being able to just fit everything in, I just kept it going. As soon as I got off that plane in year 12, just buckled down for the HSC and then just kept it going. But yeah, with Defina, it was a real turning point because I was like, okay, this is something that I can grow. And I ended up growing the team to 13 people. And
from like 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah, like we had a huge exponential growth. And I grew us in, 4 different countries, surf life saving. Like we really expanded the company, which was such a great learning experience. And I guess my theory of like, okay, trying to like make money in the corporate space and then doing something good for the environment, like these people I'd read about, just absolutely came to a bit of a halt a little bit when I, went to the United Nations.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I wanted to go here while you're doing Defina, working as general manager, you're finishing your uni degree. Like, they've obviously already trusted you with running the whole bloody business when you weren't even finishing.
I was so
your uni
inexperienced. I learned so much.
Learn on your feet, but
yeah,
while still doing this environment work and this, the amazing work that you are doing there. So through the Defina time, I know in Defina, like, you change the processes and the systems to be far more environmentally friendly, far more sustainable. So you internally in your business still make an impact. But yeah, what else are you working on? You got Plastic Free Cronulla in your first semester. Through the Defina years, what other environmental projects are you working on? Because this is where COP comes around.
Yeah.
Can you explain what COP is?
Yeah. So I guess to get to the UN, I was selected with the Plastic Free Cronulla story, which sort of, that was my focus. And we pretty much built this collective. One of the businesses we worked with, we removed 120,000 plastic straws a year just from that one business. Wow. So they were a huge operation. That was our largest one, right down to school canteen, tuck shops. I spoke at schools, community events. Like, we just really changed the culture in the Sutherland Shire about what plastic is and what sort of, I guess, trying to protect the beaches is. It isn't something that's fringe. It's like everyone wants a cleaner ocean. And so that was the thing that we really tried to push. And the state government were doing review of what items they were going to phase out. And we had really great relations with all levels of government. So the old Prime Minister was my local member. So we were sort of working with him on a federal level, working with our state MP on a state level, and working with the local council on sort of grassroots council level. And so with the state government, we pushed them to ban all the items we were targeting with our campaign that had been so successful with the business community. And we were told by a senior minister that, our, letter that we said, and hey, the business community want to see these changes. It really made a difference. And we saw plastic straws, plastic cutlery, and a bunch of other items banned in New South Wales, which was just like a really nice thing, which obviously there's people attacking it at all different ways. And for us to be able to go about it this community way, this business way as well, which is sort of the real sticking point when you want to create change. And it's always like, especially after COVID, the business community is going to struggle if we make them all switch from plastic straws to paper straws. And we sort of had the case study and said, hey, no, here's a list of however many businesses in Cronulla that, had made these changes and they're thriving. So
that's so cool. So you were leading that up, Plastic Free Cronulla, with your mate from Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah, so they sort of helped, I guess, introduce me to some businesses and steered me on the right track. But
so you've done that. Did you get like Sutherland Shire Young Person of the Year?
Yeah, I won a few awards. Like there was always things like that. But the I guess exciting thing that sort of led from Plastic Free Cronulla was being invited to be part of this World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council, which having the meetings and meeting young people all across the world, this would have been when I was 21, just really opened my eyes up to, I guess, the issues that I had in Cronulla and why I started what I did. And, the actions that I took were similar across the world. That my, narrow focus of Cronulla and the ocean was something that all these other young people had their own calls to action and their own desire to protect the ocean. And then that sort of put my name forward to be part of this program where they sent some young leaders from Australia across to the United Nations. And that experience honestly changed my life, to go to the United Nations Climate Conference in Egypt. And I was so fortunate to be able to go there and have the support to go over. And
so who sends you for that? The Australian government? Or
so the government engage different groups that sort of have government overflow badges. So the government have their staff that go, and then they sort of go out to the market a bit and sort of try to find the right people to
bring along.
To represent Australia. And I was on a panel about, what young people in Australia are doing, and just meeting, so many amazing people from all across the world. But my first conversation I had at COP was probably my most impactful and meaningful. It was meeting this young guy from the Marshall Islands, and we were chatting about, I just had, been to Europe in summer and sort of, sort of chat about things that you typically chat with young people about. And I started chatting about how much I love my home of Australia and the Shire. And he was telling me about the Marshall Islands and how in 5 to 10 years he's going to have to leave his country. And I just thought, this is crazy. Like, this is real. Like, you think of climate change, and I go back to high school and I sort of was watching it and learning about it at school. And you just realize that this is a human, these are humans that are really on the forefront of it. And it's that experience, like I remember just being, like I journaled a lot at the time because I was like getting home, because you get, the ups and downs. You hear really inspiring stories, but then you hear stories of just absolute heartbreak. And, I was crying like quite often, and well, not that often, but
upset, yeah.
And, but yeah, it was an experience that really just shook me and like made me really reconsider, I guess my time frame of like, I've always wanted to do something for the environment and create a lot of change, but we don't have, 15, 20 years for me to make millions of dollars like these other people and sort of reinvest. Like, you've got to do something now. And the other really cool thing that I learned was that, there's great solutions out there, and there are a lot of people that want to support. So you don't have to create something on your own and then try to, build it up. You can actually build some really cool partnerships and go from there. So
I love that. Can we talk about, I just want to bring some light. I think it's important right now in this podcast to educate maybe my audience with some of the environmental challenges we are facing, but let's kind of go specifically to the 2 COP conferences you've been to now, the global challenges that we are facing, and then maybe we can narrow it down to like some of the Australian challenges. And I know we're going to talk about this later because this is a lot about what the workshops we're doing, but I'm certain that once you started to be exposed to more of the challenges globally we're facing was the reason why you really wanted to, lean into this and leave Defina, which we'll catch up with that part of your story. But what are just some of the simplest ones and easy to understand environmental challenges that we're facing for the audience to learn?
Yeah, well, I remember sitting in a presentation that I'm sure everyone knows, the bushfires that we had in Australia that were just so heartbreaking, and it was catastrophic, yeah. And I remember watching this huge LCD screen showing all the natural disasters and fires over 2019 and 2020, and thinking of how crazy things were in Australia. It was just a blip on the world map of Australian fires, and constantly the Amazon was burning, constantly the African forests were burning, and it just showed like all these wildfires across the world, North America. And I remember just watching Australia over there and just seeing like that little, microsecond of Australia burning, and thinking of how crazy it was. And then, looking over and seeing just the rest of the world, like what everyone else is going through. And it's a real global problem, but it's exciting to be an Australian in this time because we have so much land, sun, wind. So we're not going to be a loser with the transition. It's,
the transition to renewables.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain why that's important? Because I think trying to make it as... Just to try to explain it in like the simplest way, because I think a lot of people hear like, oh, climate change or global warming, which I guess we've like steered away from, but why, like what is causing the climate to get warmer and why is that an issue?
Yeah. So pretty much burning fossil fuels. So fossil fuels is literally fossils. So plants that have been buried, after layer and layer and layer over millions of years. So plants that were around during the dinosaurs that have been so compressed down, and they've actually become, fuel that we can use for oil and
by burning.
Yeah, by burning it. So pretty much there's carbon that's absorbed in those deep layers in the world. And so when we burn that carbon in oil, gas, coal, driving your car, etc., that emits emissions, so carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere. And there's obviously a lot of different sources of emissions, but the carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere, and humans have been, like in Australia, we've had 60,000 years of, indigenous, country management. And so you think of the time frame of this change, it was only, 1850 or so, the Industrial Revolution started. And in just such a short, less than 200 years, we've literally, created, so many great things, but we have completely changed the world, and our population across the world has grown so much. And because of that, we've emitted, the carbon dioxide has gone in terms of the, they've got ice core samples where they dig, kilometers down to work out how much carbon was in the ice in all these different parts. So they can track it back hundreds of thousands of years. And the carbon that we have in the atmosphere has gone, it's very steady, all the way up in the last, correlation with the Industrial Revolution and post sort of World War II, this amazing boom that we've had. And at the same time, temperature has increased. And again, I didn't study science, so I have spent a lot of time with climate scientists to try to understand and absorb it, which has been, I guess, very lucky that I can explain things in simple terms, because it is quite simple how it works, because we've got more carbon in our atmosphere, which is the sort of the barrier between space and the earth, I guess, the atmosphere, which I'm sure most people will know. But because there's more carbon, it means as the light comes into the earth from the sun, as it tries to refract out, and go back out to space, it actually can't, because there's more molecules of carbon dioxide, which there haven't been
to get through. So then it makes the earth warmer.
Yeah, exactly. So the heat can't escape. So it stays on the planet. And so the ocean absorbs most of that heat. So that's why this year has been absolute record temperatures for the ocean, becoming the hottest it's ever been in recorded human history, which again contributes to ice caps melting, contributes to so many different changes, increased,
change in like animal biodiversity because of temperature.
Yeah.
Plant biodiversity because of temperature.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much what the issue is at the moment, is that as humans, if we've grown in population and we've, really evolved and lived the lives that we live now, we've just emitted way more carbon that's never been in our atmosphere before. I think the last time it was this high was, I'd love to butcher this statistic, but it was a long time ago. I'd say like millions of years ago.
The carbon was this high.
Yeah.
So it has been like this before.
Yeah, but back then, when the carbon was this high,
we weren't trying to sustain
the planet, there was no life that we have on this planet.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so different to how we live now. So, and yeah, the climate has always been changing. It has been changing for thousands of years, but it's never changed this quickly in like literally less than 200 years in terms of the global span of things.
And then the reason why the warming temperatures, and that's why we're getting these natural disasters, because it's hotter, the fires are burning longer, but natural disasters from extra heat makes more condensation, so then you get bigger storms when you have
exactly.
big typhoons and whatnot all around the world too. So everything's interconnected.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the hopeful thing is that scientists have spent so much time, and there is so much research out there that just points to what we need to do. And there's a thing called a carbon budget, which is pretty much how much carbon can we put into the atmosphere until things are pretty much locked in for a lot of changes. Like the world has already changed so much, even in, speaking to my parents and grandparents, what Cronulla was like back then and what it's like now, or just seeing the amount of natural disasters that are happening across the world constantly. Yeah. Like it flooded in Dubai recently. So it's crazy. So the carbon budget means how much carbon can we put into the atmosphere until things are pretty much locked in to a great extent.
Reversible.
So if we start making these changes now, it's going to be a gradual slope to net zero emissions, or where we, transition out of coal and gas and oil into more renewable things like wind, solar, which again, come with, recycling and different things that we need to sort of do and think about. But if we can reduce our carbon gradually over the next 20 years or so, it's going to be a lot easier than having to rip a Band-Aid off and just full go into a lockdown period, because there's only so much carbon that we can emit, and the earth is slowing. I mean, populations are sort of, coming on board, but we just need to really ramp things up as quick as possible so that we can gradually decrease. Instead, at the moment, things are pretty steady, or if not increasing.
Yeah, there's so much to go into there, but we're not going to actually jump into it now. We're going to keep moving through your story, because this is a lot of stuff that we are about to start trying to educate, but in a really digestible way, to students with our Blue Minds program. Now, I'm going to touch on how we met. This is like right around the time I think that we sort of met through your Delfina journey towards the end of it, when a few of the athletes who wore Delfina, Britt O'Brien and Sam Fricker, are also ambassadors with me with the Good Human Factory, both Olympic divers and great friends of both of ours. And we did a signature Good Human Factory Defina Swimwear, which was really cool. I think there's still a couple left. If you go on the show notes, I'll put a link in there if you want to go grab some. But that's how we met. And I was like, oh, this guy's such a legend. And we started to, meet in just a few Zoom meetings, I think it was, through that. And then, what was the next part of our chapter? Then we started doing the regional workshops. So let's talk, you do the first COP, you're starting to get inspired, going, you know what, I want to do a bit more, because I think anyone listening right now might be inspired by this part of your journey where you go, oh, I've got this great job. I'm like, I've got worked my way to the top of this business. I'm the general manager of it. I could continue to scale and grow this business, but although it is environmentally friendly and sustainable, you wanted to make more impact, because I'm sure there's someone sitting there right now that's in a job that they're, pretty happy with and doing quite well, but there's just something in their gut that doesn't feel right. And knowing you, I know how you felt. So how did you build the courage and build the sort of transition to leave Defina? Is that where you want to go next, or do you think talking about the Youth Ocean Carnival first?
Yeah, well, I mean, last year, which was sort of coming back from COP and being like, okay, I want to do as much as I can outside of work hours to really try to make a difference. And I was very fortunate to be connected with Tim and Trina pretty much like 2 weeks after I got back from Egypt, and they sort of shared, this concept for the Youth Ocean Carnival. And
so Tim and Trina, for anyone listening, are great friends of mine as well, who co-founded Youth Ocean Carnival with Sam Fricker, who is an ambassador, obviously. So we all got connected through this project of the Youth Ocean Carnival, which was connected with World Ocean Day, trying to educate and inspire youth to take better care of the ocean.
Yeah, so I was part of the Youth Ocean Carnival World Ocean Day Advisory Council. So I was invited to speak at the event and sort of be part of this event, which was pretty cool. So yeah, I guess as that, kept evolving and, we started doing these workshops, and at the same time, the idea that I had sort of coming back from COP and thinking, how can I make an impact? And firstly, how can I learn a lot? Because I didn't necessarily know too much going over to COP the first time. I also came back and had a lot of people reaching out and saying, hey, like, what can I do about climate change? I'm so concerned about it. And I didn't really have a straight answer. I didn't know at the time what a lot of young people could do, because there is so much concern out there and young people do want to be part of the solutions, but I didn't have the answers. So I thought, okay, well, can I go and, make a documentary and try to find some of these solutions and travel to the front lines? And so I had this idea to create this documentary, and was very fortunate to be able to get it off the ground and travel to some amazing places and take some time off work to go to Tuvalu, which is literally the least visited country in the world and so beautiful. Samoa and Bali and Great Barrier Reef and all across Australia, and just interviewing all these leaders in different fields. And as I was working full time, even when I was in Tuvalu and taking leave, you're still always on when you're running a company. You can't ever escape it. And, I was interviewing everyone, and they were all just saying, the first thing that you can do as a young person, or the first thing you can do at any age if you want to create something, is to just take that first step. And it really stuck with me, because it didn't matter if it was the guy who invented the sea bins, those bins that go in the water, or, some of the world's leading, youth climate advocates, or people who have created amazing companies or solutions. They all just said the same thing. So I thought, okay, well, there must be some merit there. And so we wrapped up filming the weekend before the 1st of December. The 1st of December, I went back to the United Nations to Dubai, and again, meeting, a lot of really amazing people, hearing some really cool stories. And and then I guess coming back, just realizing again, like, things aren't getting better, and going back to work, it's straight from the plane, and, going back into the routine, like, really still ambitious with this company, and just sort of spending some time and just really thinking to myself, look, like, there is such a short window, as I said, that carbon budget. How much carbon can we put into the atmosphere? So we've really got a 4 to 5 year window to do as much as we can now. And I spoke with my parents and I said, hey, if I move back home, and can I, live under your roof? And, because I really want to try to, like, give this, a crack and have no regrets in life. And it's similar, like, I'm very close with my grandparents, and I always think, oh, why didn't they buy shares in Apple? Or why didn't my parents buy so many properties when, they're all so cheap? And I'm thinking of what my kids or grandkids are going to say to me. And I think they're going to say, like, what did you do to try to turn things around for climate change and the ocean? And that's something that I think about a lot of the time, like what my kids are going to say to me, or what they're going to think of my actions right here, right now. And if I told them, hey, like, yeah, I knew all these things, I had great connections that I made at the UN and sort of could have done this, but I decided to, make more money at this company and sort of still have impact and do some really cool things with it. But, would I regret it? And the answer that I had was yes. So I met with the board and just said, look, like, yeah, it wasn't an easy conversation at all to, a company I was with for 7 years and had scaled and, wanted to keep building.
Gone from the intern to the general manager.
Yeah, and wanted to keep building for, another couple decades. Like, I didn't see any reason to leave. But I met with him and I said, look, like, I am struggling a bit because I love this company, but I just know that I'll regret it for the rest of my life if I don't just completely rip the Band-Aid off and just jump fully into trying to protect the ocean and trying to do as much as I can now to help with my generation and our generation that's going to have to live through a lot of this when we're older, but our kids, our grandkids. And they said, oh, well, like, do you have anything to go on to? And I said, look, I don't, but I'm not going to just rush off anytime quickly. Like, I'll help you guys get the right systems and everything set up so it is an easy transition because I want the business to go well, and it's been thriving since I've left, which is very interesting. But yeah, and I made the decision to leave and I haven't looked back. It's been such an awesome couple months since wrapping up with Defina.
Yeah, it's been really cool to watch it because I was sort of a part of the journey, really, because I remember having conversations with you back in like April or earlier in the year because we've been running regional Be Kind to the Environment workshops under the Youth Ocean Carnival, which went amazing. And I remember you kind of starting to mention it. And I remember, which, I mean, I don't know if we should talk about it on the podcast, mentioning to you this idea of this toothbrush that I had, this gratitude toothbrush. And you're like, oh, that sounds so much like I'll just tell you now, like, I'm actually leaving Defina, but I'm trying to find somewhere to put my energy that's actually a big opportunity to help the environment. And at the time, like Youth Ocean Carnival, we were about to do our big event at Luna Park, which you were investing a lot of time and energy into. But you were also like, yeah, I don't know where I'm going after this. But obviously you've built so many great relationships with different key stakeholders in the environment space, in the philanthropy space. And you just needed to kind of like take that leap and then something will sort of, take the leap and build the plane on the way down. But you're definitely building the plane now. We've got some really exciting stuff coming up over the next couple months. So yeah, what once you did leave the job back in June?
Yeah, that was my last day. Yeah. End of May was my last day. So
yeah, what have been the next couple months? Who have you been?
Yeah,
I know, but
yeah, well, it goes back to sort of these experiences that I had meeting young people all across the world and been, very fortunate to be able to speak at schools for years about, protecting the ocean and
Plastic Free Cronulla
and every time I speak at an event, there's always people that say, oh, I'm so concerned. Like, thank you so much. Like, now I know what I can do. And then reading a report that said, 2 out of 3 young Australians have eco-anxiety and are concerned about the environment. And I feel like that's something that not just young people, but probably a lot of people listening, when you look at the bushfires or when you think about the future, it's not that often that you think of the future in terms of the world and these, crazy things that are happening. And you think, oh, great, well, things are going really well. And so I think for young people, the environment is such a stressor for people. And I've got friends that have said they don't want to have kids because they're afraid of the future that they're going to, deliver children into the world. I felt like
that, to be honest. I've literally had exactly that thought many times.
Yeah, which is so crazy. It's like, it's sad, but it's like, how do we as young people take the future into our own hands now and rewrite the future for the better?
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what... Yeah, so you hear that study. I'm trying to think how, like, Blue Minds even came about. This is only, like, 2 months ago. We've kind of just, like,
yeah, well, at the same time, like...
Yeah, because you're like, you need to find something, and then I guess that's where I come in. We've been delivering these workshops for the Youth Ocean Carnival, which is almost, like, a completely separate project to Blue Minds. And obviously we gelled together as mates, and the vision that we both have for the ocean, but also mental health, just tied in so well together after reading that report. And then you start working with Surfers for Climate, yeah?
Yeah, so with the documentary, which, so as I was sort of wrapping up with Defina, I started...
That was your next thing, to do your screenings for your documentary.
Yeah, so Rising Up, started to screen it, at the cinema, community events, festivals, like, started to get a lot of traction, and someone actually watched it and they're like, hey, would you be interested to sort of like tour it in Queensland? I know you've done New South Wales and WA, like Queensland would love this. So if we give you, a bit of money, would you be interested to sort of take it up there? And I thought, okay, well, I can go and show the film, and speak at schools about my journey, but I want to create something that's bigger than me and bigger than sort of what I could do as one individual. And in the work that we had been doing with the Youth Ocean Carnival and these regional workshops, I know the power that when you can teach young people positive mental health skills and you really try to empower them to have those practical skills to deal with a lot of the things I've found in the environment space where a lot of young people are burnt out, they're, anxious. There's so many issues that young people have because they don't have that underlying foundation. And I remember when I feel like I was up here for work last year and chatting to you about, eco angst that I sort of had at the time, sort of just coming back from the UN. And you were saying, hey, like, don't try to control the whole world, just control your own world. And that really stuck with me and like led me to create some really amazing things last year. And so this message that you have is so powerful for young people to listen to. And I think tying it with the message that I've learned about how to actually protect the ocean and some of these tangible actions that you can do, I think it's a really powerful joining of forces to, I guess, at the same time as I'm showing this documentary and inspiring people through that, showing it, doing these workshops to schools, community groups, unis, TAFEs, and really just trying to rewire young people in Australia to not view climate change as something that's out of our control, but something that, yes, we might not be able to control what, happens in the US elections or what happens in all these things, but we can control so much, and it's important for us to put the future into our own hands and try to rewrite it for the better because we have the pen and we can literally do whatever we want.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I watched the documentary for the first time a couple of days ago, and it's amazing just watching all different young people in their own little way making their impact. And that's the thing, if we have millions of people around the world working on small projects, then we're going to change the world. But if we have no one because we're just scared we're not going to make any impact, then nothing's going to happen. And that's why it's really cool over the next couple months. Make sure you keep an eye on my social media, Kal's social media. I'll leave it all in the show notes because there is a bunch of screenings of his documentary coming up. There's one on, what's the date of the...
Next Friday, the 23rd.
Yeah, so next Friday, this episode is going to come out on the Friday, and next Friday, the 23rd of August, at HOTA, Home of the Arts Cinema, in Southport, I think it is, or in Surfers Paradise.
Yeah.
We've got a screening, or Cal's got a screening there for Rising Up. I'm going to be sitting on the panel there. I think the ticket's $20. I'll leave the link in the show notes. So if you're on the Gold Coast, it would be awesome if you could come there to learn some individual solutions that you can start making yourself to, get educated and then also hopefully make some impact in the ocean space. So keep an eye out for the Rising Up. But now I thought it'd be cool to explain to everyone a little bit about Blue Minds, what we're doing with Blue Minds, what the workshops are like. We're literally, when we finish recording this podcast, going to go and sit down and finish up the presentation, but we've definitely got the bones in place for it. So maybe we can kind of go back and forth of like what we're going to talk about and sort of why. Going off what you said, 67% of young people feel like they, are anxious about the future. So before we can teach them things to do to impact the ocean and the environment, we have to teach them how to lower their anxiety so they can take action. So yeah, what's your thoughts on Blue Minds and the workshops that we're going to deliver?
Yeah, well, I think it's a huge gap, and a lot of my friends that have sort of gone into secondary education teaching, even primary school teaching, have like come to me and said, hey, like my students are so concerned about the environment, and because they sort of, similar to my experience that I had in high school, and things haven't changed, where the world has changed so much since I was a student. But when my teacher taught me about climate change, there was no, here's what you can do about it, or here's how to deal with some of the thoughts that you may have. And at the moment now, like a lot of the engagement that young people have with climate change and with these environmental problems is through social media, like looking at headlines or turning on the news and seeing things there. There's not really a lot of optimism, not a lot of, I guess, the reality that we do have time to turn things around and that we can be part of it. So for me, it's really trying to empower these young people to learn these skills to, when they do come up against these barriers and these challenges, that firstly, but maybe they watch something on the news and it makes them feel really anxious. They do have those skills that you teach, but then also hope lies in action. So if they can work on themselves and make sure that they're the best versions of themselves, they'll be able to create so many amazing things that we've both seen through, I've seen through interviewing people for my documentary, you've seen through interviewing people for your podcast, with the Youth Ocean Carnival and the Be Kind to the Environment workshops, just how impactful young people can be.
Yeah. No, I'm really excited. Maybe I will do like not a run through of the presentation, but I'd love to explain to the to the listeners right now, basically what we're going to do with the workshop, because I think everyone listening is going to get something out of this too. So the approach that we're taking is the 3A approach that I kind of came up with. The first A is awareness. So we're going to talk to the students and, the people at the TAFE and the universities about, first we need to build awareness skills. We need to take note on what's going on around us. We need to be more mindful. So I'm going to take people through a simple skill where we focus on what we can see, what we can hear, and what we can feel. But then also an extension of awareness is we need to be aware of the problems that are going on in the environment space. We need to be aware, like what we've touched on earlier in this talk. There's obviously the warming of the ocean, the extra carbon in the atmosphere, the plastic production, which is creating more carbon, but then it's also polluting the ocean. Like there's such a complex and nuance to so many things. So in the awareness part, we're going to bring up some of the most common problems that we're facing or challenges that we're facing. Then I'll let you pick up the last day. The second day we're going to talk about is appreciation. Gratitude's obviously a huge part of my work. And before we can actually want to care for something, we have to appreciate it. We have to, show some gratitude for it and bring some appreciation for what the ocean really does for us. So do you want to this is a good point for anyone out there listening right now. Cal's got a couple fun facts, I guess you'd call it. And I've thrown you on the spot here. But what the ocean does for us. I mean,
2 in every 3 breaths comes from the ocean. But I think every single person would have a different connection to the ocean. Like mine is through my sport, through just, loving, just looking at the ocean and, I think as Australians, it's something that binds all of us together. We all want, a healthy ocean. So for everyone, this would be, I'm sure the weather, as it starts to warm up in summer, like everyone going to the beach and going to the ocean, it's just trying to think a bit differently of like, wow, I actually really appreciate that we've so lucky in this country, 85% of Australians live within the coastal zone.
Yeah,
and so
it's our duty to take care of it.
100%.
Yeah, so I think that's where we're going to really talk about appreciation. But then I know that in my journey, that being kind to others, being kind to myself, and being kind to the environment, and now through studying the science behind kindness, is it makes us feel good. So as we said before, like hope lies in action. If we start taking action, which is the third A, it's actually going to make us feel good too. So we're going to go through, once again, a 3-pronged approach of individual action we can take to take better care of the oceans, community action we can take to take better care of the oceans, and then innovative action that we can take. So do you want to maybe go through some of the individual actions that we can take?
Yeah, I mean, as a starting point, like just having conversations, I think is the biggest thing that we can do. Like telling people how you feel about, your emotions in terms of eco-anxiety or different things like that, but also, reducing plastic usage,
using
advocating.
A keep cup, using a drink bottle.
There's so many individual things that we can do. And then when
turning
you think
lights off at home.
Yeah. And then when
the small, like low-hanging fruits, picking up rubbish if you walk over it.
And then looking upstream, I guess, with the community, thinking of your sport community, your school. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize is all the different touch points and groups that you have in your life. So for me, it's, my water polo club, the Chamber of Commerce, like all these groups, local council, like all of these different facets of touch points that we have. And as a young person at school or university, there's so many different ways to create change. And that could look like, trying to get solar panels at your school, trying to form a, school environment group, which I've seen so many environment groups be formed off the back of the work that we've done already, speaking of schools. And so there's so many different ways that you can create change in that community level.
As well, signing up to vote and actually voting with an educated vote, not just going, oh, yep, I voted Liberal every year because my parents do, or, because someone told me to. Actually having a bit of a look at the policies and which politicians in your community are going to have a positive outlook on the environment and have, the same values and perspectives that you hold.
Yeah, and I think it's values and that's part of, having conversations with politicians, which I think a lot of probably people listening would say, why would I want to go meet with a politician? But they have told me a lot of the times, like from all parties, all walks of life, that they really struggle to connect with young people and find ways to hear from young people. And if you're a politician who by definition are paid to represent the community, whether at local government, state or federal, if you're not hearing from our generation, like 20% of Australia's population, you're then just going to be making decisions based on what you do hear and the conversations that you do have. So I think the most powerful thing for a young person to do if you only wanted to give 1 hour of your whole year to making a positive contribution to the environment, would be trying to book a meeting with your local politician, whether local, state or federal, and just, maybe take 15 minutes to drive there, maybe a half an hour chat, 15 minutes to drive home, and just having a chat and just saying, look, like, what are you doing for young people? Here are my values as a young person. I want to grow up in a future of Australia that's cleaner, that, my kids can enjoy, that.
Yeah, so what's that? How does that conversation go for someone if they're like, you know what, I want to go take a bit of action? Because do you go to your politician and ask them about their policies, or do you just ask them, like, what are your stance on, protecting the ocean and protecting our environment for future generations?
Yeah, I think the first thing is not being intimidated, because I meet with a lot of politicians and I don't pretend that I'm a scientist or I'm just Kal. I'm just a concerned young person who's just trying to, make the world a little bit of a better place. And I think if you're a young person, don't feel like you need to memorize, all the statistics of the latest, UN report or all these different things. Like, you're just a young person who's concerned about something that you've seen, and maybe it's the environment, maybe it's something else, or maybe you're wanting to get a footpath built or something, like whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And this is what life was like back in the day, but I feel like we've just become a bit disconnected to the people in power. And so the other big thing when you're trying to meet with these people is, imagine that you're that person. Would you want to meet with yourself again? So I think that's where a lot of
hostile. I feel like a lot of people see politicians that they hate them, but then they meet with them with hostility and anger and frustration, and being furious rather than like being curious and talking to them and actually being like, hey, like, at the end of the day, it's not that person making that like huge decisions. Like, there's so much bureaucracy to go with it. So going in and treating, the person like a...
Yeah, well, like you'd want to treat yourself. Yeah. And then that just means that if you want to meet with them again, you're going to be able to. So that would be, I guess, the advice there. And then you can always have questions like, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's something else. But for example, in the environment might be, what are you doing in terms of, the net zero targets? How are you reducing emissions? What's your stance on, a particular piece of policy in terms of emissions reductions? Or there's so many different facets to, these problems that we face. But unless young people are having these conversations with the politicians, they're not going to hear from us.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's a really good one, and we obviously both have a few different politician friends, and they don't bite. Some of them are really nice.
Some of them do, but not. But they, I don't. Yeah, but there's a lot of really good, and that's the thing is, like, they want to hear from young people, and even I remember meeting Scott Morrison multiple times, who was Prime Minister, and someone who didn't necessarily have a great environmental track record whatsoever. But, I met with him and, discuss plastics and sort of,
said,
what are you doing about it?
Of course they're not.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, it's, opening these conversations, it's a great learning experience. And if they start to hear from more people in the community about different things that you're passionate about, they're going to make those decisions and actually represent, the whole community instead of just those people who are vocal already.
Yeah, I love it. I think there's definitely some great takeaways there for anyone listening. And then the last part of the workshop that we're going to be delivering, and the third prong of action, is innovation, because it's all well and good to pick up trash from the beach, but a statistic that I learned from doing some work with Parlay Environment group a couple of years back was, in the last 10 years, we've produced more plastic than the previous 70. So we're like exponentially producing more plastic. So it's all well and good to yell, like, go do like pickups and, do cleanups, but we're producing it way faster than you could ever clean it up. So it comes back to innovating and working out different products that we can use, different systems that we can have in place, so we're not using single-use things, so we're not, just burning coal that can never be regenerated. That's why it's so important to be regenerative with everything we do, whether it be the products we use, whether it be the fuel sources we use, because eventually the stuff's all going to be out of the ground, and we need to find solutions for that. And it's
Yeah, no, 100%. It's like trying to, I guess as young people, we have so many ideas, and I mean, everyone has ideas, but a lot of the time we just think, oh no, I can't do that. So that third pillar of action is actually backing your idea and seeing where it goes and taking that first step. And through the documentary, for example, there's a guy called Stephen who we both know up in the Magnetic Island. He had an idea to create a coral farming robot that can help to, replant coral a lot quicker than a lot of these things in the industry. And he just took that first step, and now he's just been doing some really incredible work.
Not to mention he left a job at NASA to go and build that robot.
Yeah.
He's a beautiful man, Stephen. He's been on the podcast in one of the environment episodes, but I will get him on the podcast in the next couple of months to hear about his journey, because it's crazy. But yeah, there's so many things that we can do, but it's actually about doing them. So that's where I think it's really important to get into action. Man, this has been a fun chat. We've got work to get into, and there's some really exciting stuff coming up. Lastly, tell me about running for council. I don't know many 24-year-olds. Would you be the youngest if you got in, or is
by
younger?
country mile.
Really?
So yeah,
but in Australia for a council member?
Probably not in Australia, but in my local area of the Sutherland Shire. Yeah.
So where'd the idea come to run? And because once again, politics is just so confusing to me. Like I feel like I'm quite a well-educated person. I'm quite well-connected. I literally have politician friends, and I still find it so confusing, the system. So what are you running for? And how does it even work?
Yeah, it's so local council is the, I guess, government that sort of can do, things that you think about, like footpaths, roads, rubbish, rates, like there's a lot of things. Yeah, but the thing that they do, which is sort of why I decided to step up and give it a crack, and is they control, the quality of our waterways and beaches to a great extent.
Yeah.
And they haven't been investing in stormwater in our local area. And my journey to create Plastic Free Cronulla started in Gunnermatta Bay, where I played water polo, and there was so much plastic. We got rid of a lot of the types of plastic, but the water quality's actually dropped last year to a poor rating by the state government's report, because there's bacteria, there's fecal matter, there's like all these things just because we're not filtering the water correctly. And so there's a lot of things I'm really passionate about, I guess, to try to, change the world. But as you said, try to change your own world. And until I feel that the Sutherland Shire is my, place where I feel, that the beaches are well looked after, and there's, those strong values that are represented in the community and in the council operation. That's why I've decided to run and, I guess, bring a young person's perspective to this conversation and this table, where it's a lot of older people. It's a lot of people that don't necessarily represent the best interests of our generation and future generations. So thought I'd give it a crack, and it's, been a very interesting journey. So I'm running as an independent, which means that you don't have a major party backing you financially or doing all the work. You've got to do it all yourself. And I've been very lucky to, I guess, have a lot of people saying, I'll support you. And on the day, we're going to have a lot of people in T-shirts and handing things out to try to get enough votes to get me over the line. But yeah, it's definitely the right thing to do. And over a 4-year period, the other thing council does is look at the zoning. So when we think about, trying to get and keep young people in the Shire that can't necessarily afford first homes, how are we keeping young people front and centre in that decision-making process, where we decide to rezone the whole Sutherland Shire region to be, suitable for young people. So, yeah.
I think it's cool. You got my vote. So anyone who's listening to this, if you do live in the Sutherland Shire, I'm not going to tell you go vote for Cal. Yeah, I am. Go vote for Cal. But send this episode on to any friends you have in the Sutherland Shire as well, because I think it's just important to get to know someone who's running in your electorate. And also get to know your story. I think it's important, if you're going to be voting for someone, to have a bit of an understanding, rather than just seeing little tiny bits in the paper here and there about them. Having an in-depth conversation like this, I think, is really cool. So if you are listening to this podcast and you have any friends in the Sutherland Shire area around Cronulla, make sure you send the episode on, share it around on your socials, and hopefully you guys have all been inspired, just like I am, by Cal's journey to, lead from the front for the ocean. Every single Australian that I know, not every single Australian. I was sitting on the aeroplane coming home from the Goldie. Going from the Goldie to Sydney the other day, and there was these guys who would have been from, out Penrith or Blacktown. Sorry to give to group people, but they told me that's where they were from, and they were like, "Oh, I'm coming home from never going back to the Goldie again." I was like, "Where'd you guys go?" And they're like, "Surfers Paradise," and I was like, they were like, "Yeah, we hate it. We're not going back there. We're going back to where we live." And I was like, "Where's that?" And they're like, "Oh, Blacktown." And I was like, "Oh, fair enough." So maybe not everybody loves the ocean, but 85% of us live within 50 kilometres of it. So it's something that is huge for our life. So it's so important that we all do take care of it. So, mate, it's been incredible catching up for a podcast. thank you for being a great friend and a great partner and business partner in this new project that we're taking on, Blue Minds, to educate and inspire kids. Also, if you're listening to this and you're a school teacher, we are going to be doing these workshops up the Queensland coast over the next sort of 2 to 3 months. So if you're in the Gold Coast, Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Townsville or Cairns area, and you're looking for a free workshop at your school valued at over $3,000, please go onto the website blueminds.org.au. I will leave it in the show notes. You can put your high school name in the expression of interest form. We'll get back to you. We're going to be taking the workshops all around the country, hopefully, if we can get some more funding and take it national after the pilot in Queensland. So if you're at a school anywhere in Australia, fill out the expression of interest and we'll get back to you and try and get out to your school later in the year. Make sure you go check out the link if you're on the Gold Coast for the movie premieres. It's going to be really fun doing that. Also, to finish up, if you're in the Sutherland Shire, make sure you vote for Kal. I think I covered everything. But mate, it's been incredible. I do finish the podcast with the same question for everyone. So let's hear your answer to this one. What does being a good human mean to Kal Glanznig?
Yeah, I think being a good human is acting true to your values and just giving things a crack. And I think if you act true to your values and you go about life just saying yes to the things that, mean something to you, I think that makes a very good human.
Beautiful. Love it. Well, thank you so much, my man.
Thanks for having me.
A great next couple of months together. And yeah, thanks for tuning in to Good Humans Podcast.
Cheers. Thanks.